The stench of stale whiskey and cheap perfume filled the air as Katherine Jones scrubbed another filthy glass at the Black Diamond Saloon. Her fingers, once soft and delicate, had grown calloused from the endless labor that had become her life since being sold to Emmett Russell, the saloon's ruthless owner. It was 1878 in the dusty frontier town of Redemption Creek, Colorado, and at 22, Katherine had already endured more cruelty than most would in a lifetime. "Move faster, girl," Russell barked, his meaty hand coming down hard on the bar top. "Customers are waiting, and you know what happens to girls who don't earn their keep." Katherine flinched but kept her eyes down. "Yes, sir," she mumbled, reaching for another glass. The threat wasn't empty. She'd seen girls who displeased Russell beaten, or worse, forced to entertain the roughest men who passed through town. 3 years earlier, Katherine had been traveling west with her family when bandits attacked their wagon train. Her parents were killed, and she was taken. Eventually sold to Russell, she'd been forced to work in his saloon, serving drinks and enduring the pawing hands of drunken patrons. Russell had made it clear that if her service behind the bar didn't generate enough profit, she'd be moved upstairs to the rooms where the other girls worked on their backs. The saloon doors swung open, sending a shaft of late-afternoon sunlight across the smoky room. Conversations quieted as a tall stranger stepped inside. Katherine glanced up despite herself. The man moved with the easy confidence of someone accustomed to commanding respect. Dust coated his dark clothes, and a well-worn hat shadowed his face. When he approached the bar, she noticed his eyes startlingly blue and assessing everything with calm intelligence. "Whiskey," he said, his voice low and measured. Katherine poured his drink, careful not to meet his gaze directly. She'd learned that looking a man in the eye could be misconstrued as invitation. "That'll be 2 bits," she said softly. He placed a silver dollar on the counter. "Keep it." Before she could respond, Russell appeared, snatching the coin. "I'll take care of that," he said, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Katherine here is still learning the business." The stranger's gaze lingered on Katherine, noting the fading bruise near her temple that she'd tried to hide with her auburn hair. "Name's Isaac Cooper," the stranger said, directing his words to Russell while seeming to study Katherine. "Passing through, looking for work." Russell sized him up. "What kind of work you do?" "Little of everything. Drove cattle from Texas to Kansas, worked as a ranch hand, good with horses." Isaac sipped his whiskey. "And good with a gun when needed." Russell's interest piqued. "Might have something. Got a ranch outside town, always need hands, pays fair, and the boys get special rates here." He gestured around the saloon with a lewd wink. Katherine's stomach turned. She'd heard that line before. Russell used the promise of special rates to lure men into his debt, then force them to work his failing ranch to pay it off. It was another form of the same trap she was caught in. Isaac nodded non-committally. "I'll think on it." For a week, Isaac Cooper became a regular at the Black Diamond. Unlike most patrons, he drank little, watched much, and always requested Katherine's service. He tipped generously when Russell wasn't looking, and never once made lewd comments or attempted to touch her. Katherine found herself watching for him, a dangerous sliver of hope forming despite her better judgment. One evening, as she served him a meal, he spoke quietly. "How long have you been here, Katherine?" She glanced nervously at Russell, who was occupied with a card game across the room. 3 years, she whispered. "Not by choice, I'm guessing." She stiffened. "I have nowhere else to go." "Everyone has somewhere else to go. They just need the means to get there." Isaac's eyes met hers. "And sometimes, someone willing to help them find the way." Before she could respond, Russell shouted from across the room, "Katherine, get over here with a bottle!" That night, Katherine lay on her small cot in the storage room behind the kitchen where she slept. Russell had hit her again for dropping a glass, but the physical pain wasn't what kept her awake. It was Isaac Cooper's words, stirring something she'd tried to bury hope. The next morning broke with commotion. 2 of Russell's men had been found unconscious behind the saloon, and 3 horses were missing from his stable. Russell stormed through the saloon, bellowing accusations. "Where's that Cooper fellow?" he demanded, grabbing Katherine's arm so hard she winced. "I don't know," she stammered truthfully. "If I find out you're lying—" His threat was cut short as the saloon doors flew open. Isaac Cooper stood there. flanked by the town sheriff and another man Katherine didn't recognize. "Emmett Russell," the sheriff called out. "I got some questions about those horses found at your place. One's reported stolen from the Marshall Ranch last month." Russell's face darkened. "I bought those horses fair and square." "That's not how Mr. Marshall here recalls it," the sheriff replied, nodding to the man beside him. As Russell argued with the sheriff, Isaac made his way to Katherine. "Pack whatever you have," he said softly. "Be ready." "Ready for what?" she asked, fear and hope warring within her. "To leave. This ends today." Katherine didn't hesitate. She slipped to her room and gathered her meager possessions, a worn photograph of her parents, a small Bible, and the single dress besides the one she wore. When she returned, the conversation had escalated. Russell was red-faced, jabbing a finger at the sheriff. "You got no proof, and I got legitimate business here." "Your legitimate business includes forcing women to work for you against their will?" Isaac's voice cut through the tension. "Seems the sheriff might be interested in that too." Russell's eyes narrowed dangerously. "The girls work for me willingly. Tell him, Katherine." All eyes turned to her. Katherine felt the weight of years of fear and submission pressing down on her. She looked at Russell, then at Isaac, whose steady gaze gave her courage. "That's not true," she said, her voice barely above a whisper at first, then gaining strength. "He bought me after raiders killed my family. I've been forced to work here ever since. He beats us, threatens us. The others upstairs, they have no choice." The sheriff frowned deeply. "That true, Russell?" "She's lying," Russell spat. "She's nothing but a serving girl with delusions. Been filling Cooper's head with stories to get his sympathy." "Then explain the bruises," Isaac said quietly. "Explain why she sleeps locked in a storage room. Explain why none of your employees ever leave town." Russell lunged for the gun at his hip, but Isaac was faster. In one fluid motion, he drew his Colt and aimed it squarely at Russell's chest. "I wouldn't," Isaac warned, his voice deadly calm. The saloon had gone silent, patrons frozen in place, watching the confrontation unfold. "Sheriff," Isaac continued, not taking his eyes off Russell, "I believe you'll find at least 6 women here being held against their will. And I suspect Mr. Russell has other enterprises that might interest federal marshals." Russell's eyes darted around, calculating his options. "You can't prove anything." "The girls will testify," Katherine said, finding courage she didn't know she possessed. "All of us will." The sheriff moved toward Russell. "I'm taking you in until we sort this out, Emmett." With surprising speed, Russell shoved the sheriff aside and grabbed Katherine, pulling her against him with a knife at her throat. "Nobody moves!" he shouted. "I'm walking out of here, and she's coming with me." Katherine felt the cold steel against her skin, Russell's arm crushing her ribs as he backed toward the door. Isaac hadn't moved, his gun still trained steadily. "Let her go, Russell. It's over." "She's my property," Russell snarled. "Been serving me and my customers for years, and she'll keep serving until I say otherwise." Something changed in Isaac's eyes, a cold fury that made even Katherine shiver. "Then you'll serve no one again," he said evenly. What happened next occurred so quickly Katherine could barely process it. Isaac's hand moved, a shot rang out, and Russell staggered backward, the knife clattering to the floor as he clutched his shoulder. Before he could recover, Isaac was on him, driving him to the ground with a single powerful blow. The sheriff quickly secured Russell, who cursed and threatened as he was hauled to his feet. "You're finished, Cooper. You and that whore both." Isaac stepped close to Russell, his voice low enough that only those nearest could hear. "She was never what you tried to make her, and if you speak of her that way again, your shoulder will be the least of your concerns." As Russell was led away, the saloon erupted in chaos. The sheriff called for deputies to help question everyone, and the women who had been forced to work upstairs emerged cautiously, disbelieving their sudden freedom. In the commotion, Isaac turned to Katherine. "Are you all right?" She nodded, still shaking. "Thank you," she whispered, tears welling in her eyes. "Don't thank me yet," he replied. "We still need to get you somewhere safe." 2 days later, Katherine found herself at the Circle C Ranch, 10 miles outside of town. The modest but well-kept property belonged to Isaac Cooper, who had only recently returned to claim it after years away. The previous foreman had managed it in his absence, but with Isaac's return, changes were coming. "It was my father's," Isaac explained as he showed Katherine to a small but comfortable room in the main house. "I left after he died. Thought I needed to make my own way. Spent years working ranches across the territory, until I'd heard about what was happening in the Redemption Creek." "You came back because of the saloon?" Katherine asked, confused. Isaac's expression grew serious. "I came back because I heard stories about Russell and his operation. My younger sister disappeared 3 years ago while traveling to meet me in Denver. Last trace of her was in Redemption Creek." Understanding dawned on Katherine. "Was she one of Russell's girls? I don't know. I've been searching, but—" He shook his head. "When I heard about his operation, I had to investigate. Then I saw you and the other women, and I couldn't walk away." "I'm sorry about your sister," Katherine said softly. "The search continues," Isaac replied with determination. "But right now, you and the other women need to heal and find your way forward." The following weeks brought dramatic changes to Redemption Creek. Emmett Russell faced multiple charges, his assets seized by the court. The women he had held captive were offered assistance by the town's church and several of the more prosperous ranching families. Some chose to move on immediately, seeking family in other states. Others, with nowhere to go, accepted temporary positions as housekeepers or cooks with respectable families. Katherine stayed at the Circle C. Initially, she helped with cooking and cleaning, insisting on earning her keep, despite Isaac's protests that she was a guest, not a servant. Gradually, a routine emerged. During the day, Katherine helped manage the house, while Isaac worked the ranch with his small crew. In the evenings, they often sat on the porch, talking until the stars appeared. "What will you do now?" Isaac asked one night, a month after her rescue. "You're free to go anywhere, do anything." Katherine considered the question. The bruises had faded, and she'd gained back some of the weight she'd lost during her captivity. More importantly, the constant fear had begun to recede. "I don't know," she admitted. "I have no family left, no skills beyond what I learned at the saloon." "That's not true," Isaac countered. "I've seen how you manage the house, how quickly you learn, and the books you've borrowed from my shelf. You're educated." She smiled softly. "My mother taught me to read and write, before everything." "You could teach," Isaac suggested. "The town's growing. They'll need a schoolteacher." The idea took root in Katherine's mind. In the days that followed, she began reading more purposefully, borrowing books on mathematics and history from Isaac's modest library. When she mentioned her interest to the minister's wife during Sunday services, the woman was enthusiastic, introducing Katherine to members of the town council. 2 months after her rescue, Katherine was offered the position of teacher for the dozen children in Redemption Creek, contingent on her passing an examination administered by the county education office. She studied diligently, and when the day came, passed with distinction. Throughout this transformation, Isaac remained a steady presence, supportive but never controlling, interested but never intrusive. Katherine found herself looking forward to their conversations, to his quiet humor and thoughtful insights. She noticed things about him she hadn't before, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled genuinely, how his hands, rough from ranch work, could be surprisingly gentle when tending an injured animal or offering her assistance down from a wagon. One evening, as summer gave way to fall, Katherine found Isaac on the porch, staring at a worn photograph. "Is that your sister?" she asked softly. He nodded, passing her the image of a young woman with his same blue eyes. "Isabel. She'd be 21 now." Katherine studied the photograph. "She's beautiful. She was smart, too, headstrong." A smile touched his lips. "Drove our father crazy with her independence." "You'll find her," Katherine said with conviction. "I hope so." He took the photograph back, tucking it carefully into his shirt pocket. "But I've also accepted that I might not, and that I need to build a life either way." Their eyes met, and Katherine felt a flutter in her chest that had become increasingly familiar in his presence. "Is that why you're staying in Redemption Creek? To build a life here?" she asked. "Partly," he admitted, "but also because there are reasons to stay that I didn't anticipate." The school term began in September, and Katherine found herself thriving in her new role. The children, ranging from 6 to 14 years old, were eager to learn, and the parents treated her with respect, a stark contrast to her previous life. Isaac often drove her to and from the schoolhouse in his wagon, using the opportunity to bring supplies to town or conduct business. One Friday afternoon in late October, as they returned to the ranch, he seemed unusually pensive. "Something on your mind?" Katherine asked. He glanced at her, then back at the road. "The Johnsons offered to let you board with them in town. Mrs. Johnson mentioned it after church on Sunday." "Oh," Katherine hadn't expected this. "Are you wanting me to move?" "No," he said quickly, then more measured. "No, but it might be more proper. A single woman living at a bachelor's ranch, people talk." "Are people talking?" Isaac's hands tightened on the reins. "Some. Nothing unkind about you, but assumptions about us." Katherine considered this. "Do the assumptions bother you?" "Not for my sake," he replied carefully. "But your reputation after everything you've been through, you deserve a fresh start without complications." They rode in silence for several minutes, the rhythmic clip of the horse's hooves filling the space between them. "What if," Katherine finally said, her heart pounding, "I don't mind those particular complications?" Isaac pulled the wagon to a stop, turning to face her fully. "Katherine, you saved me, Isaac, but that's not why I—" She faltered, courage wavering. "Why you what?" he prompted softly. "Why I've come to care for you," she finished, meeting his gaze directly. "It's who you are, how you treat people, how you've never once made me feel like I owed you anything." Isaac's expression softened. "I care for you too, Katherine, more than I should. Perhaps. Why shouldn't you? Because I want you to choose your path freely, without feeling obligated or grateful." Katherine reached out tentatively, placing her hand over his. "This is my choice, my free choice." The touch seemed to break something in Isaac. He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away, and when she didn't, he kissed her gently at first, then with growing intensity as she responded. When they finally broke apart, breathless, Isaac rested his forehead against hers. "I've wanted to do that for weeks," he admitted. Katherine smiled. "I've wanted you to do that for weeks." Their relationship blossomed as autumn deepened. Isaac courted her properly, with chaperone dinners in town and rides on Sunday afternoons. They spoke of their pasts, Katherine sharing memories of her family and the dreams she'd had before tragedy struck, Isaac revealing his years of wandering and the guilt he carried over his sister's disappearance. "I should have met her in Denver as planned," he confessed one evening as they sat by the fireplace. "But I took another job, asked her to travel on alone. If I'd been there—" "You can't know what would have happened," Katherine said gently. "And you're doing everything possible to find her now." The first snow fell in November, blanketing the ranch in white. Katherine had fully settled into her role as teacher, earning the respect of the townspeople who had once known her only as one of Russell's girls. The other women who had been rescued had either moved on or, like her, found new beginnings in Redemption Creek or nearby towns. Russell himself had been convicted and sentenced to 15 years in territorial prison, his appeal denied by a judge unswayed by his claims of running a legitimate business. The Black Diamond Saloon had been purchased by a businessman from Denver who transformed it into a respectable establishment, hiring the former bartender who had always been kind to Katherine as manager. As Christmas approached, Isaac seemed increasingly distracted. Katherine worried that he was reconsidering their relationship, or perhaps had received bad news about his sister. On Christmas Eve, after returning from the town's celebration at the church, she finally confronted him. "Isaac, what's troubling you? You've been distant all week." He ran a hand through his hair, a nervous gesture she'd come to recognize. Not troubled, just thinking. "About?" Instead of answering, he walked to his desk and removed something from the drawer. "I received a letter last week from a detective I hired in Santa Fe. He found evidence that Isabel may have passed through there, heading south." Katherine felt a pang of apprehension. "You're leaving to search for her." "I considered it," he admitted. "But then I realized something." He took her hands in his. "I can hire people to follow leads. I can't hire someone to live my life while I chase ghosts across the territory." Relief washed over her. "So, you're staying?" "I'm staying," he confirmed. "And I'm hoping, that is, I wanted to ask—" He fumbled with something in his pocket, then dropped to one knee before her. "Katherine Jones, these past months with you have shown me what it means to truly care for someone, to build something real and lasting. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" He opened his palm to reveal a simple gold ring with a small pearl. Catherine's breath caught. "Isaac, if it's too soon, I understand," he added quickly. "We can wait, court longer." "Yes," she interrupted, tears of joy filling her eyes. "Yes, I will marry you." The kiss that followed sealed their promise to one another. They were married in the town church on New Year's Day, 1879, with the entire community in attendance. Katherine wore a new dress of pale blue silk, a gift from the town's dressmaker, who had become a friend and carried wildflowers preserved from the fall. Isaac stood tall in a new black suit, his eyes never leaving Katherine as she walked down the aisle toward him. The minister spoke of new beginnings and God's providence, but Katherine barely heard the words, too focused on the man before her and the future they would build together. As they exchanged vows, Isaac added his own promise. "You will never serve again, Katherine. Not me, not anyone. We will be partners in all things, equal in our home and in our life together." Their wedding celebration continued well into the evening, the town hall decorated with evergreen boughs and candles. Katherine danced in her husband's arms, scarcely believing the transformation her life had undergone in less than a year, from captive to teacher to bride. As spring arrived, Katherine and Isaac settled into married life at the Circle C. She continued teaching, now riding to town, on her own horse, a wedding gift from Isaac, while he expanded the ranch operations, hiring additional hands and purchasing neighboring land that had fallen into disuse. In April, a telegram arrived that changed everything once more. A woman matching Isabel Cooper's description had been found working in a cantina near the Mexican border. She called herself Belle and claimed to be from Colorado. "I have to go," Isaac told Katherine that night. "I have to know if it's her." "We'll go together," Katherine insisted. "She'll need another woman there if it is Isabel." The journey south took nearly 2 weeks, by train where possible, and horseback where necessary. When they finally reached the small border town, Katherine felt a sense of déjà vu as they approached the cantina, not unlike the Black Diamond in its clientele, though smaller and somehow less menacing in the bright Mexican sunlight. Inside, Isaac scanned the room until his eyes locked on a young woman serving drinks. Though thinner and harder looking than in her photograph, the resemblance to Isaac was unmistakable. "Isabel," he whispered. The woman looked up sharply, her eyes widening in shock and then disbelief. The tray she carried clattered to the floor. "Isaac!" Her voice was barely audible over the noise of the cantina. What followed was a reunion both joyful and painful. Isabel had indeed been captured by the same gang that had taken Katherine, but had been sold further south. Like Katherine, she had endured years of servitude, eventually escaping but finding herself trapped in another form of bondage due to her lack of money or connections. "I was too ashamed to try to find you," she admitted as they sat in her small room behind the cantina. "After what happened, what I had to do to survive." "There's nothing to be ashamed of," Katherine told her, sharing her own story. "The shame belongs to the men who did this to you, not to you." Isaac nodded, his eyes wet with tears. "We've come to bring you home, Isabel, if you want to come." The cantina owner was reluctant to lose one of his girls, but a substantial payment from Isaac, along with a thinly veiled threat, when the man suggested Isabel owed him for room and board secured her release. They returned to Redemption Creek in early June, the ranch blooming with new life as summer approached. Isabel, initially withdrawn and wary, gradually began to heal in the peaceful surroundings and the company of her brother and new sister-in-law. In July, Katherine confirmed what she had suspected. For several weeks she was expecting their first child. "A baby," Isaac breathed when she told him, his hand gently touching her still flat stomach. "Our baby." "The doctor says early February," Katherine said, smiling at his wonder. "A winter child." Isabel thrived as the months passed, helping Katherine prepare for the baby and gradually taking on responsibilities around the ranch. When the new schoolteacher arrived in September, Katherine having reluctantly resigned her position due to her pregnancy and the distance to town, Isabel expressed interest in assisting at the school. "I always wanted to teach," she confided. "Before everything." By Christmas, Isabel was working as the assistant teacher 3 days a week, her natural affinity for children and quick mind making her valuable despite her lack of formal training. She had also begun courting with the town's young doctor, who had shown nothing but respect and patience as she navigated her new life. On a snowy February morning in 1880, Katherine gave birth to a daughter they named Elizabeth Rose Cooper. Isaac, who had paced anxiously outside the bedroom during the long labor, wept openly when the midwife placed the tiny bundle in his arms. "She's perfect," he whispered, sitting carefully beside Katherine on the bed. "Just like her mother." Katherine touched her daughter's delicate face. "She has your eyes." "Poor child," Isaac joked, but his expression was one of pure adoration. As spring returned to the ranch, the Cooper family settled into a new rhythm centered around Elizabeth's needs and the expanding operations of the Circle C. Isaac had purchased additional cattle and hired more hands, making the ranch one of the most prosperous in the county. Katherine, once she had recovered from childbirth, took over the ranch's books, her quick mind for numbers proving invaluable. On warm evenings, they would often sit on the porch, Katherine with Elizabeth in her arms, Isaac beside them, sometimes joined by Isabel, and occasionally her suitor, Dr. Thomas Wells. "Did you ever imagine this?" Isaac asked one such evening, as the sun set in a blaze of orange and gold over their land. "When you were at the Black Diamond, did you ever dream of this life?" Katherine considered the question, looking down at her sleeping daughter, then at her husband's face, lined now with the beginnings of laugh wrinkles rather than worry. "I stopped dreaming," she admitted, "until you walked through those doors and looked at me like I was a person, not a possession." She reached for his hand. "You gave me back the ability to hope, Isaac. Everything else, our home, our family, grew from that." Isaac brought her hand to his lips. "You saved me too, Katherine. I was lost in my search for Isabel, letting life pass me by. You showed me it was possible to keep looking forward while still honoring the past." In the distance, a coyote called, answered by another further away. Elizabeth stirred but didn't wake, secure in her mother's embrace. "I love you, Mrs. Cooper," Isaac said softly. "And I love you, Mr. Cooper," Katherine replied. "Now and always." As twilight deepened into night, the stars emerged one by one above the ranch, each a bright point of hope in the vast darkness, much like the love that had bloomed between a broken woman and the cowboy who had promised she would serve no one again.